Throughout our roller coaster journey, Jalen Hurts' career has been defined by trying to control the uncontrollable. Imagine being the guy, only to have it all taken from you in the blink of an eye as you watch someone else take your shine with no guarantee you'll ever see success again. Would you fold like a lawn chair or fight back? Hi there, we'll be right back to scheduled programming, but I need to take a second to tell you why you need to subscribe to Secret Base on Patreon. As you see on the screen, for just a few bucks a month, you can get access to a ton of exclusive drops, episode extensions, and so much more. Let's get back to it. If you've ever heard a quote from Jalen Hurts, I wouldn't fault you for thinking he's a crooked pastor, talking in circles, dropping countless idioms that ultimately read like gibberish. Take his 2019 stance on leadership, for example. Nobody drops an entire coffee bean into a boiling pot of water because that's simply just not how that works, but the point seems to be that Hurts has prepped himself to withstand adversity and be solid for his teammates through thick and thin. Now, he could have just flat out said that, but with added context, his message, while still nonsense, reads a little more clearly. Hurts said this in college before ever taking a snap with the Oklahoma Sooners after being shown the door by the school that had previously made him a star. You don't just willingly remove yourself from a dream scenario at a winning program without being pushed toward that direction. It was kinda out of his hands. More on that later, but at OU, instead of having to decipher his riddles, Hurts let his game do the talking. In just one season in Norman, Hurts dropped eye-popping numbers, leading the Sooners to the college football playoff, all while finishing second in the Heisman race. His season was an incredible testament to betting on oneself and reaping the benefits that come with it. It was Hurts taking full control of his destiny, but to land with Oklahoma, he was first stripped of everything. For those of you shouting, "But he's a product of Alabama," I told you earlier, I would get there. As a highly rated dual-threat QB playing high school ball in Texas, Hurts initially signed with the Crimson Tide. He entered one of college football's most prestigious programs as a true freshman with a swaggering attitude that the team was already his, which he ultimately proved it was. In 2 seasons with the Tide, Hurts marked his name all throughout the school's record books, racked up accolades, and quarterbacked the University of Alabama to back-to-back national championships. In such a small window, journalists debated his position amongst the greatest signal callers in program history. Then came the 2017 national championship. After earning MVP during the semifinal win a week earlier, Hurts put up a stinker in the first half of the Natty as Bama went into halftime trailing the University of Georgia 13-0. The Tide's offense looked lifeless with Hurts under center, and in an attempt to shake things up, Alabama head coach Nick Saban did the unthinkable. He benched his reliable playmaker and rolled with the true freshman QB with just 8 games of backup experience under his belt. What seemed like an extremely ballsy move ultimately netted the Tide their second title in 3 seasons. Hurts was a champion, but after being the guy that got him there, he mostly became an afterthought, watching from the sidelines as new quarterback Tua Tagovailoa and Saban reaped all the glory. Hurts took the benching in stride and spoke glowingly about Tua's talents post-game. But behind closed doors, the loss took a toll on him. Getting demoted on the game's biggest stage didn't necessarily signal a bright future for Hurts at Bama, but he wasn't prepared to give up. Which meant what exactly? He had options to ponder. With 2 years of eligibility left, the QB was free to transfer, and despite being recently benched, would certainly garner interest from other schools. However, he would have to sit out a season, and the decision could potentially screw up his academics as he was set to graduate from Bama in December. He could also switch positions altogether. Now, there was never any indication that Hurts himself had considered the idea, but ESPN NFL draft expert Mel Kiper Jr. believed it would benefit him. Kiper thought Hurts didn't have the goods to be a pro QB, so I guess it would make sense for him to get a jump on things and make a change if Hurts saw a future in the NFL. There, of course, was the option to stay and compete at Alabama, but he had no control over who would start. And if he were to lose out, speaking for myself at least, I don't know if I could keep a cool head constantly watching the dude who took my job and be buddy-buddy with the coaches who made the call to do so. Or he could just hang up his cleats, which seemed like a reality. Following the championship game, Hurts found himself in a dark place, considering stepping away from football altogether. He was lost. However, he ultimately decided that his best path forward was a battle for the role that had been taken from him. But that didn't stop outside parties from trying to dictate his future. Media speculation had Hurts dipping for Bama if he didn't win the starting job, unwilling to be the guy to stick around and hold the clipboard for Tua. Saban even seemed to be prepping for the moment after signing former East Carolina quarterback Gardner Minshew, who later flipped. Hell, even Jalen's own dad fanned the flames. Saban didn't allow either of his QBs to speak with the media initially, and while everyone had their opinions on what Hurts should do, when he was free to speak, he seemed fed up with the whole thing. Mostly, he was a bit salty that Saban kinda threw him under the bus about his future with the team, and he had to reassure his coach that he was committed to Alabama, whether he was the guy or not. He also felt frustrated about the narrative spiraling into something larger than it should have been. He understood that he couldn't speak for his coaches and didn't have control of how the media spun things, but believed the folks at Alabama had plenty of opportunities to step to him and at least see where his head was at. In a situation involving your livelihood, I wouldn't want anyone else speaking for me either, so I feel him. Saban wouldn't provide a clear answer on who was the favorite headed into camp, and while Hurts was ready to put his best foot forward, again, the decision wasn't his to make. His confidence was shaken and was reduced to cheering on the guy who snatched his job as Tua led the Tide to the SEC championship with a shot at the playoffs on the line. Except, Jalen's decision to stay became proof of something larger. As Bama trailed UGA heading into the fourth quarter of that conference championship game, Tua went down with an injury, and with the roles reversed, Hurts was set to be the hero. He stepped in and led the Tide on 2 scoring drives in 10 minutes, one through the air and the other on the ground, to give Alabama the lead and ultimately secure the conference title. Before he could ever take charge of a game again, Hurts first had to control himself. By trying his hand at Bama, he put the decision in Saban's hands, unable to name himself the starter, but when his moment came, he answered the call. He readied himself for the success that came at Alabama, and regained that control by transferring to Oklahoma, where he again proved his worth before eventually declaring for the 2020 draft. Just to recount, this is a dude who started his collegiate career as a true freshman, led one of CFB's historically elite programs to consecutive title appearances while etching his name in their school record books, and then somehow one-upped all that with a totally different program and would have surely won the Heisman if it weren't for LSU's Joe Burrow, who had arguably the greatest single season by a quarterback in college football history. Getting benched in a championship game is certainly a nasty blemish on that resume, but you would think he would have bought himself some good favor in the way he handled himself to bounce back, which wasn't the case. When Hurts declared for the draft, there were mixed opinions on how his game would translate to the pros. Scouts believe he had several things to improve on if he were to pursue a quarterback role in the NFL, and despite the doubts, he had no plans to switch positions in the pros. His draft stock was all over the place. Some saw him as a mid to late pick in rounds 5 and 7, others saw him slotting somewhere between rounds 2 and 4. So, it came as a bit of a shock when the Philadelphia Eagles drafted him 53rd overall. Media members not only believed it was an insane reach, but the previous season, Philly had just extended their franchise QB Carson Wentz to a long-term deal. It seemed foolish to waste a valuable draft pick on a player who might not see the field for years, if at all. And just like that, Hurts had to sit and wait for his time again. He obviously couldn't control which team drafted him, but he chose to carry himself with the same confidence and humility he had when he transferred to Oklahoma. He's stuck on the coffee bean thing, but whatever the poor analogy, when his opportunity did come, Hurts again rose to the occasion. After a string of poor performances by Wentz during the 2020 season, Philly benched the QB they wagered their future on and turned to the rookie, never looking back. Hurts not only stepped in, but he thrived. In 2022, just his second season as a full-time starter, the young QB had a massive breakout season, playing his way well into MVP discussions as he led the Eagles all the way to the Super Bowl. It just wasn't handed to him. He obviously had no control over Wentz turning into a pumpkin and flaming out, but was in full command of his preparation as a backup, and when the main guy got demoted, he stepped in and acted as if the spot was made for him. It's like he's been there before or something. Philly went on to face the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 57, and Hurts put on an all-time performance, landing himself in uncharted territory by a Super Bowl quarterback. He was nearly perfect with the one thing fully in his control, his performance. But with under 2 minutes left and the score still tied, Kansas City faced a third down deep in Eagles territory. A Patrick Mahomes pass fell incomplete, and the door was wide open for Hurts to get one more shot. Instead, a questionable holding penalty on the Eagles defense erased the incompletion, handed Kansas City a fresh set of downs, and let the clock bleed out before a go-ahead field goal sealed it. It's the kind of heartbreaking loss that can forever kill a competitor's spirit. The kind where you do everything right and the game still gets taken out of your hands. But it only seemed to fuel Hurts. After a disappointing first-round exit the following season, Philly retooled and during the 2024 campaign found themselves in a Super Bowl rematch against the Chiefs. Except that time around, Hurts and the Birds wouldn't be denied exacting their revenge with an ass-whooping as Hurts took home MVP. And if you thought Hurts wasn't defined by his journey, you thought wrong. While reflecting on the win, the QB discussed how low he felt going home empty-handed on the game's biggest stage last time, but specifically pointed out that he showed up for his team and didn't hit the bench as he had in college. He kept tabs his entire career, and it's molded him. If nothing else matters but winning, then Jalen has truly reached that mark. But none of his success came easily, and at each turn he stayed grounded and fought back. Not because adversity didn't touch him, but because he decided long ago how he would respond whenever it did, just like a good old coffee bean would. Thank you for watching this episode of Prism. Reminder to never give up on yourself, because if no one else believes in you, you gotta make sure that you at least do. Okay, that's enough of the inspirational talk. And if you want to check out more of our videos, we got plenty more heat for you right here on YouTube.